Late March 1911. Washington Place, Lower Manhattan. The smoke from the Asch Building had cleared by morning, but the street below was still closed. 146 people were dead inside those walls. The building stood intact above them. He had come in off a Pennsylvania Railroad freight car. Newark by dark, Hudson River Ferry by dawn. 4 days in the city when the smoke rose from Washington Place. The notes don't say where he was when it started. The Bowery lodging houses charged 7 cents for a floor mat in March of 1911. 12 cents bought a cot with railing. Men slept 4 to a section. Nobody recorded their names in anything that survived. The Asch Building at Washington Place and Green Street was certified fireproof when it opened in 1901. The Triangle Waste Company occupied the top 3 floors, 500 workers, fabric scraps beneath every cutting table. The certification said nothing about fabric. The Pennsylvania Railroad's Eastern Freight Corridor ran from Pittsburgh through Philadelphia into the New Jersey yards. Men without tickets rode open boxcars and timed their movements around the railroad police. Newark was the last yard before the Hudson crossing. The Hudson River crossing from Jersey City was by ferry, the route that dock workers and day laborers used when they couldn't afford the tube. Manhattan in March 1911 smelled of coal smoke and salt water. Yet he arrived into all of it at once. The Lower East Side held an estimated 300,000 people per square mile, the most densely populated real estate on Earth by documented measure. He found work unloading fish crates at Fulton Street Market. 40 cents a half day. He ate once. The garment industry was New York City's largest employer by 1911, producing over $1 billion in annual output. Most of it ran on piecework. Workers paid per unit, not per hour. Speed was survival. Nobody in those buildings discussed the locked doors. 20,000 garment workers had struck the Shirtwaist factories in November of 1909, Triangle included. Harris and Blank held out through the winter. Their workers returned without a contract. Some of the exit doors had been locked before the strike. They were locked after it. Triangle's workforce was mostly young immigrant women, Italian, Jewish, Eastern European, the majority between 17 and 23. Most had been in the country fewer than 5 years. None had significant legal recourse against the conditions they were made to work in. March 25, 1911, a Saturday, still a standard workday in the garment industry. At 4:45 in the afternoon, a fire started in a rag bin on the 8th floor of the Asch Building. Who dropped the cigarette was never documented. The flame spread through the 8th floor in under 2 minutes, tissue paper patterns and scrap fabric feeding it faster than any response was possible. The standpipe hose was rotted through. Some of the water buckets were empty. The fire had the floor before anyone reached a stairwell. From the 8th floor, the fire moved to the 9th, through the stairwell shaft, through the elevator well. The 9th floor is where the names in the coroner's record are concentrated. His name does not appear in those records, not once. Whether that was deliberate, or whether the note simply never reached the pages where he wrote it, we don't know yet. If you want to be here when we find out, subscribe. The road continues. The stairwell door on the 9th floor's Washington Place side opened inward, into a crowd pressing hard against it from the other side. The fire marshal confirmed the following morning it had been locked during the shift. The key was in the foreman's pocket. Though the external fire escape on the Washington Place side had never been load tested under emergency conditions, it collapsed under the weight of the workers on it. The bottom section had been bolted shut at the alley exit for years prior. Workers began jumping from the 9th floor windows at 4:57, 12 minutes after the fire started. The fire department's longest ladder reached the 6th floor. The nets deployed by firefighters tore from the impact. Some workers reached the street holding each other by the hand. Frances Perkins was at a Washington Square townhouse when the alarm went off. She reached Washington Place in time to watch workers fall from the upper floors. She later told investigators that afternoon was the moment she understood what labor law was actually for. The New York City Fire Department arrived within 3 minutes of the first alarm. Their longest ladder reached the 6th floor. The department had submitted requests for longer equipment in 1908 and again in 1910. Both requests had been denied on budget grounds. By 6 o'clock, 146 bodies had been counted. 123 women, 23 men. The youngest was 14 years old. Her name was Kate Leone. Most had been in the country fewer than 5 years. The fire marshal's team documented 2 stairwell exits on the 9th floor, one locked by key, one opening inward against the pile of bodies. One fire escape had collapsed. No functioning sprinkler system. The building had passed its last fire inspection 6 months prior. The notes place him near Washington Square Park in the days after the fire, not at the building, but where families had gathered to wait for word on the missing. Relief workers set up tables by the fountain. Several thousand people were there by nightfall on March 26th. The city opened Pier 61 on the North River as a temporary morgue. 47 bodies arrived unidentified. Families walked the length of the pier across 2 full days before the last body was named. The final identification was not completed until April 5th. The New York papers ran the fire across their full front pages on March 26th. But across all coverage in the first 3 days, the word that appeared most frequently was not fire, it was trap. The doors had made it one. 5 days after the fire, Rose Schneiderman stood before 2,000 people at the Metropolitan Opera House. The working woman's body had proven too cheap to protect, she said. It was not the first time. It would not be the last. The locked 9th floor door was the central documented fact in the fire marshal's investigation. New York state labor law had prohibited locking exit doors during working hours since 1909. That law had never been enforced at Triangle. The key was in foreman Samuel Bernstein's pocket. Harrison Blank had survived by retreating to the roof and crossing to the adjacent NYU building. They were indicted on manslaughter charges in April of 1911. Their attorney was Max Stewart, the most expensive criminal defense lawyer in New York City. The trial was set for December. Triangle's piecework system meant a worker's daily earnings depended entirely on speed. A skilled operator earned $6 to $12 per week, twice the average unskilled wage in 1911. The doors were locked to prevent theft during working hours. That was the stated reason. Triangle's workers were overwhelmingly immigrant. Italian women from Sicilian and Neapolitan communities east of Washington Square, Jewish women from the Eastern European settlements of the Lower East Side. Neither group had won a contract in 1909. Neither had significant legal representation. The New York State Legislature established the Factory Investigating Commission in June of 1911, 4 months after the fire. Robert F. Wagner and Alfred E. Smith served as its principal legislative agents. The commission's first year included over 3,000 site inspections. Commission investigators found locked exit doors in 31% of the garment industry sites they visited in their first year. Inoperable fire escapes appeared in 44%. The Triangle Fire was not an anomaly. It was documented evidence of standard industry practice. He moved at the margins of the disrupted city, carefully, watching what the aftermath did to the people inside it. The notes record 3 separate locations in Lower Manhattan across the weeks after the fire. None of them are north of Canal Street. The trial began December 4, 1911. The prosecution centered on the locked door, documented, photographed, the key in evidence. The defense challenged every witness account individually, working to establish that no single witness could prove the owners had personally ordered the door locked. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Harris and Blank were acquitted on December 27, 1911. There is a marginal notation in the notes from that period, written in different ink, that reads only, "They owned the building too." The civil suits were settled in 1913. Each family received $75 per deceased worker. The owners had collected approximately $60,000 from their insurance company, roughly $410 per life. This was considered equitable under the prevailing legal standard. Frances Perkins testified before the commission 7 times between 1911 and 1915. She helped draft 36 new labor laws enacted in New York by 1914, covering fire safety, working hours, and child labor. She later brought those frameworks to Washington as Secretary of Labor. The notes place him near the Jersey City freight yards by early April, the same Pennsylvania Railroad exchange point he had entered through 3 weeks before. The Atlantic Seaboard Corridor South was open that time of year. He had been in the New York region approximately 3 weeks. The road in 1911 was vagrancy ordinances, railroad police, and lodging restrictions designed to keep men moving without allowing them to accumulate. The factory was the other side of the same arrangement. Neither one offered a door that opened outward. The Triangle Waste Company reopened at a different address on April 3rd, 9 days after the fire. Harris and Blank resumed production. They were cited twice in the following year for locking exit doors at the new location. Each citation carried a $20 fine. The Asch Building at 23 to 29 Washington Place remained standing through the fire and everything that followed. New York University purchased it in 1929. It stands today under a different name with a plaque on the exterior wall. The structure was never demolished. The names of the 146 were published between March 26 and April 8, 1911. 7 remained unidentified for decades. The last positive identification from the Triangle Fire was made in 2011, 100 years after the day it happened. The Triangle Fire was not the first multi-fatality garment industry fire in New York. A factory fire in Newark in 1910 had killed 25 workers. None of those prior fires had produced reform legislation. None had been witnessed from the street by Francis Perkins. He crossed back to Jersey City by ferry in early April, the same 23rd Street dock, now reversed. The freight yards connected south toward Philadelphia and the Atlantic Seaboard Corridor. Men who knew the yard timings waited near the switching lanes before dawn. The last notation placing him in the New York region is dated early April 1911. A meal near the Newark freight station. Beans and bread, 11 cents. That is the kind of entry the notes are full of in 1911, the price of staying alive recorded in the margin. The documented record of the Triangle Fire filled 7 volumes of Commission archives. The fire marshal's report ran 63 pages. The Wanderer's notes from the same period cover 4 pages. Prices, distances, road conditions, and 1 marginal notation about a building still standing. The Factory Investigating Commission conducted over 1,836 site inspections in its first year of operation. Its reports established the documentary foundation for the American system of workplace safety regulation, a system that by any documented measure did not exist before March 25, 1911. By 1914, the New York legislature had enacted 54 pieces of labor legislation traceable to the Commission's work. Mandatory sprinklers above 7 stories, required fire drills, prohibited door locking. Harris and Blank had been acquitted. The law changed anyway. What the road offered in 1911 that a factory could not is not in any commission report. It appears in the notes, a single sentence written in different ink than everything surrounding it. The notes don't explain the change in ink. The freight corridor south from Newark ran through Philadelphia and Baltimore into the Upper South. A man who knew which cars were being watched could cover 200 miles in a day. The notes record the rhythm, yard timing, conductor rotations, gaps in the enforcement schedule. What he recorded about New York in 1911 is not a record of the fire itself. It is a record of the city in the weeks after. Streets near Washington Place, families at the park, newspapers on the lodging house counter. He was present. He watched. He moved on. The last record that places him near Washington Place is dated early April 1911. After that, a price notation near the Newark freight yards, then the Philadelphia corridor, then nothing for several weeks. The Asch Building still stands at 23 to 29 Washington Place. The locked door is in the historical record. What he carried forward from New York is not recorded. The road doesn't keep that kind of account. If this is the kind of historical storytelling you want to keep following, subscribe to the channel. More roads, more cases, more of what the official record left out. And if you know this era, this region, or this kind of road, tell us in the comments what you know, what the records missed, what your family remembered that nobody wrote down. The people who lived this history are the reason anyone can reconstruct it. We want to hear from them.